what we're going to do is we're going to add and subtract decimals. So we're going to be on skill number 14. We're going to do this on page 22. So like we always do, we're going to start with a essential question. The essential question for today is, how do I add and subtract negative and positive decimals? I know that in the past we have done adding and subtracting decimals, but we do have to include our integer rules now whenever we're adding and subtracting decimals. So it's negative and positive decimals. We are going to have 4 examples. So let's make sure to write those down. Example number 1 is 3 and 62 hundredths. We're going to add a positive 18 and 57 hundredths. Example number 2 is negative 5 and 78 hundredths. Again, we're going to add. This time we're going to add a negative 18 and 3/10. Example 3, 12 and 49 hundredths. We're going to subtract this time. A positive 7 and 25 hundredths. Lastly, example number 4. We have 9 or positive 9. We're going to subtract a negative 3 and 245 thousandths. I'm sorry, example number 1 was supposed to be a negative 3 and 62 hundredths. So we'll start with step number 1. Step number 1, what we're going to do is we are going to always line up the decimal point. The decimal point is a singular position in space where the numbers move left to right on. A lot of times in our history, people have taught us to move the decimal point right or left, but that is actually inaccurate. The decimal point actually cannot move. The second thing we're going to do for step number 1 is we're going to make sure the larger number is always on top when we set this up vertically. In the past, that didn't matter when we were doing addition, but nowadays, now that we have negatives and positives, it does change how we do it. Now let's go to step number 2. If the problem is a subtraction problem, or if it is subtraction, we need to do the additive inverse. So that'll be the first 2 steps that we take. Is first, we make sure to line up the decimal point when we're setting up vertically. Second, we're going to make sure that we always put the larger number on top. And then the third thing we're going to do, I know it's 2 steps, but the 2 first things are quick. They're just setup. And the second step is doing additive inverse. So now what we're going to do is we're going to write those examples at the bottom vertically. So start with example 1. And we're going to make sure to line up the decimal point and put the larger number on top. So looking up here, 3 and 18. So we're probably going to put the 18 and 57 hundredths on top. So 18, 57 hundredths. That means on bottom is going to be the negative 3 and 62 hundredths. Make sure you keep that negative sign. Sometimes when we're doing these, we forget to add the negative sign, and we are adding. So we've got example 1 set up. Let's go to example 2. Sometimes we put in a space saver. This space saver, underneath the 1, it's not a necessity because it's in the tens place. But for this example, we're going to put it in there just so I can show you how to use it. Now, I like turning my page sideways. The reason is it can line up all of your place values to make sure you're adding up ones with ones, tenths with tenths, and hundredths with hundredths. And again, we look at our numbers and compare, see which one is larger. We put the larger one on top. So in this case, 18 and 3/10 is going to be a larger number because 18 is larger than 5. And so on the bottom, the 5 and 7/8, 5 and 78 hundredths goes on bottom and is a negative. Again, we need to make sure that those signs follow us. All right. I don't want to write over to the side. We're going to do it down at the bottom. So we're going to go example 3. Example 3 is set up as a subtraction problem, so we need to do additive inverse. So grab your red pencil, and we're going to change this subtraction sign. We're going to change it over to addition, and then the very next sign changes to whatever the opposite is. So if it's positive, it goes negative. If it's negative, it goes positive. So now we've got our 12 and our 7. The 12 is obviously going to be bigger, so that goes on top. So 12 and 49 hundredths is going on top, and on bottom will be the negative 7 and 25 hundredths. Again, let's turn our page sideways so we can get our organization down. Some of your handwriting really suffers, and so this is a method that can help you if you have bad handwriting. Because if you don't organize these columns perfectly, sometimes you get them crossed and you start adding tenths to ones, and you just can't do that. You end up with a wrong answer. So, again, we're going to do these using the blue columns, writing one number per column. So the first one is 9, and remember, after that 9 is a decimal point. Even though you don't see it, because we don't need it, but there is a decimal point to the right of the 9. So that number goes on top, and on bottom is the 3 and 245 thousandths. That's example number 4. All right, now we can move on to example 3. You can see that we have 2 that are set up how we normally do it, and then I got 2 that are turned sideways. So now we can go on and we can do step number 3, which step number 3 is going to be our integer rules. Because I told you, now that we're working with negatives and positives, we have to remember the integer rules. So follow integer rules to solve. Also, remember to bring down that decimal point. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the problems over on this next page. So I'm going to write out the examples, and then we'll go ahead and solve them. Again, this problem, I had put that space saver 0 in here, so I'll put one here. And it is a negative. And then our example 3, I'm just going to do 1 and 3 because they're both set up how we normally do it on the page, where our page is turned right side up. So first, we'll look at the signs, and we both have different signs. We have positive and negative for example 1 and positive and negative for example 3. So I put this little D here to remind us that we need to look at page 13. It says different signs subtract. So make sure we're doing that. That's why we always need to make sure that bigger number is on top. So 7 minus 2 is 5. 5 minus 6 can't be done, so we need to borrow. So we take from the 8. It turns to 7. We're going to take those 8 ones and put them all in the tenths column. So it'll become 15 tenths. So 15 minus 6 is 9. Bring down that decimal point. 7 minus 3 is 4. Now if you notice, we have a positive and a negative, but bring down your 1. Almost forgot. But that top number is going to be our positive. It's going to be our larger number, so our answer is also positive. That top number, if we set it up right, that top number, our answer will always have the same sign as the top number. So it's a good way to remember that, is the answer always has the sign of the top number. Now we're going to work on our integer rules again, looking at different sign subtract. So do the same thing. We have different signs. So 9 minus 5 is 4. 4 minus 2 is 2. 2 minus 7 can't be done, so we need to borrow from the 1. The 1 tens, so that goes to 0 tens. And we're going to put all of those 10, or all of those 1s from the 10 column in the 1 column, and then 12 minus 7 is 5. Again, keep eye on the negative and positive, so it is going to be positive. Sign of the greater number, right? Alright, so let's turn our page and we'll go on to examples 2 and 4. Make sure to line them up in their columns. So we have negative 5 and 78/100ths. That's going to be the smaller number, so we'll put that on bottom. So it's different sign. We are also going to subtract, same as our integer rules for 1 and 3. So now we can't subtract here because there is no number. We have to put something there. So we are going to put in a 0. Now we can add as many zeros to the right as we want to. It doesn't really change the number at all. But we do have to borrow because you can't take any numbers from 8. Also 3 and 7. 3 is a smaller number, so we have to go over again. So we're going to borrow from the 8, bring it down to 7, then that 3 changes to a 13, but we didn't borrow to come over. So now we need to change that to a 12 and then borrow over to make our 0, 10. 10 minus 8 is 2. 12 minus 7 is 5. Bring down the decimal point. And then 7 minus 5 is 2. Then 1 minus 0, or 1 minus nothing, is 1. And again, sign of the greater number. Like we said before, the greater number is always the top number. So it's a positive. Example number 4 is our 9. It's just a whole number, but again, we have that decimal point, so make sure you're paying attention to that. And our other number is 3 and 245 thousandths, and you're adding these numbers. So we take our red pencil, and I'm just going to write in the space savers. This time we don't have different sign, we have same sign, add. So we're going to add these two numbers because they're both positive. So it's going to be our space saver zeros. Zero plus 5 equals 5. 0 plus 4 equals 4. 0 plus 2 equals 2. And 9 plus 3 equals 12. Make sure to bring down that decimal point. Don't forget that this is a positive, so this is going to be a positive 12 and 245 thousandths. And that is your notes for addition and subtraction of negative and positive decimals.